Welcome to Capital Conversations. I'm Marty Owings. It's Tuesday, April 17th, 2012.
I'm Andy Friedel. Tonight we're going to cover the ongoing controversy over how Minnesota oversees spending on its public health programs. We'll talk with two state senators who have been trying to add more transparency to the process.
As always, you can tweet us or leave us a message on our Facebook page, and we'll ask your questions or read your comments on the air. So tonight, our production partner, Public Record Media, has a story up on their website regarding this story, and it charts the history of the issue through a series of public and private sector documents. That's publicrecordmedia.com. You can find a link on the front page of publicrecordmedia.com. Go there and take a look.
So we are going to be joined tonight by Senator Sean Nienow to my left.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You've been here before.
I have.
Nice to see you again. And Senator John Marty, even further to the left. Welcome. All right. At the start of the session, we discussed this issue briefly. So, Senator Nienow, can you kind of fill us in on what's been going on since that time?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we had a bill that was introduced in the House and in the Senate. It was a three-part proposal. Basically, it was looking for some independent third-party auditing of the prepaid medical assistance plans, the welfare healthcare programs that we have. And John has been asking questions about this for a number of years here. And this year, we introduced a piece of legislation. We have now come to the point where that bill has moved in the House and the Senate. In the Senate, that language is currently being carried in the HHS Omnibus bill, which will have a conference committee starting right after the show here tonight. Okay. You want to add to that, John?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. We think that when you're dealing with $3 billion, more than $3 billion a year in public money, that there ought to be accountability. And this program has been growing for a couple of decades now with contracts with the health plans, and nobody's auditing them.
Well,
and we've been trying to change that, and Senator Nienow's bill it's been slipped into the other bill, and
yeah,
we're hopeful we'll get some progress this year.
well, why the concern over transparency? Doesn't the state know how the funds are dispersed?
Well, yes and no. It goes all the way up to the federal level, and the feds have taken quite a bit of interest in this with U.S. Senator Charles Grassley and California Congressman Darrell Issa. They've been asking some questions. The U.S. Senator has sent a number of letters to the plans and the governor and to the commissioner asking for different things. But you go back to the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, and the GAO issued a report last year, 2010, I forget which. CMS, who certifies the rate setting. The rate is what we pay for the premium to these
and
plans.
And CMS is a federal agency.
Center for Medicaid, Medicare Services, or Medicare, Medicaid Services. And the GAO issued a report that said, I'm paraphrasing, but basically said CMS has no idea as to the underlying data on these rates that they certify. They don't know if they're legit or not. Okay. They basically get a form that's filled out and go, yeah, looks good to us.
And to add to that, I mean, the assumption is that the states are giving them good data, and the states, in Minnesota's case, they send them these letters saying, here's the rates we're paying, here's what we're spending on it, and so on. But our argument is that the state doesn't really know what they're paying for or what they're getting. We put all this money into it, and a lot of people get health care, but again, when you're dealing with billions of dollars, the legislature and the state at times, when we're dealing with contracts of $100,000, $200,000, when we're talking thousands of dollars, they sometimes are pretty careful to make sure the money's well spent, as there should be.
Yeah.
But here we're dealing not thousands, but millions, and then hundreds of millions, and then billions of dollars, and no audits. No real audit to show where the money is going, how it's being spent.
And the concerns aren't anecdotal. It's not just, I don't think we're looking into things. They're, and I think we talked about this last time we were here, there, as a result of a lawsuit and some depositions and testimony and things like that, there was testimony that there was a state employee on a teleconference who stated that they manipulate these rates to draw down extra federal funds. And that goes back to the GAO report that CMS is certifying rates and they have no idea if the underlying data is any good or not. And we have people testifying that a state employee said that things like that are going on.
So, trying to dig in a little more, I mean, because this issue, it can start making your eyes glaze over,
yes,
right? Yeah, okay. And on the public record media site, they do a really good job of laying it out, going back decades of how the program started. But one of the things that struck me as I was reading it is this idea that the state hasn't really had any oversight or auditing of how these rates are set. And so to me, the thing is, you kind of have to be this bulldog if you really want to get into this issue. And you sort of have a reputation of that.
That's why I think there's so much interest. David Feinwachs, the attorney who worked for the Hospital Association for the past 30 years, was fired, we would argue, and I think he would argue as well, because he was digging into this. And that should be in the hospital's interest, because all doctors, hospitals, everyone's been complaining that under the prepaid medical assistance program, every time the legislature hears complaints they're not getting paid enough and puts more money into it, the money goes to health plans, and the doctors and the hospitals are saying, we're not getting the money. Mm-hmm. Where's the money going to? And David Feinwachs, the hospital attorney, starts digging into it and saying, hey, there's a big question. He called it a black box. The money goes into it and something comes out of it, but what's going on in there and who's taking the money? And he actually got fired over that, and he's in a big lawsuit over that issue.
Just for asking the questions.
Just for asking the questions and raising the stink about it. And a lot of us, I mean, when he came to me, I had never been on the Health Human Services Budget Committee before, so this wasn't my direct turf or anything. And so he comes in and says, well, there's no accountability here. Well, everybody says there's no accountability with things, but everybody figures it's so complicated, but there's obviously so much money here. Somebody's minding the store.
They usually don't fire lawyers under their employ over that sort of thing. Yeah.
You usually don't, especially when they're doing what the hospital should want. Saying we want to make sure that the money that's being paid to go for medical care is coming to them.
Right.
And that they're getting the money they're owed. And so I think it was huge questions there, but he was trying to tell people, just because you assume it's too complicated for you to figure out doesn't mean somebody else is watching what's going on.
Just so that people don't get the idea that, okay, that sounds like an interesting witch hunt, we should also remind folks that it takes a lot to bring a Republican and Democrat together this day and age. So, but all kidding aside, though, there were some pretty serious allegations, if nothing else. Allegations existed, and then the firing of Feinwachs maybe helped to magnify the issue a little bit. Can you
and there's a lot of dots. I mean, for example, maybe things are connected, maybe they're not. But you look a few weeks back, and there was a little bit of a blurb of a news article about Blue Cross Blue Shield. Their CEO, well, this is a couple of months ago, their CEO just decided, it was time to move to Florida. Okay, maybe that happens. New CEO comes in, 3 top senior executives no longer work there, and not necessarily voluntarily.
And separated. Oh, by the way, Senator Nienow, during that period, shortly after, they decided to return magnanimously some money to the state, right? Is that my understanding?
Well, it's related to some things from last year.
Okay.
But 3 of those senior executives no longer work there. 2 of whom were directly connected, very closely connected with this rate setting process with the state of Minnesota. Now, maybe that's coincidence, maybe it's not, but it's dots that connect. And then going back to the independent third-party audit, and I referred to U.S. Senator Grassley and Congressman Issa, Senator Grassley asked for information from the commissioner about all of her communication with CMS about last year's give back from UCare, $30 million. UCare just magnanimously, is that the right word?
Close enough.
Voluntarily gave back $30 million. Just because we had overpaid them, apparently. And Senator Grassley was wondering, well, are the feds due half that money? Because they subsidize half of this program.
Sure.
Now, the legislative auditor, in February, he has a duty to audit state expenditures of federal funds. In February, he was doing an audit, and he had the same question. He found it hard to believe that the feds didn't want their half of the money back.
Okay.
And he asked the commissioner, I'd like to see all of your communication with the feds regarding this, with CMS and anybody else, because the commissioner was saying basically she talked to people and they said we could keep the money. The legislative auditor didn't get anything that showed any kind of concern. Senator Grassley, I saw the responses sent to Senator Grassley. He wasn't sent anything that showed any kind of concern. And about 2 weeks ago, as a result of some data practices request, a letter from CMS to the department showed up.
Okay.
And that letter basically said, I'm paraphrasing, we think we're due half of that $30 million, and if you don't think we are, tell us why. The department failed to give that to a U.S. senator, failed to comply with state law and give it to the legislative auditor who has subpoena power. This is back in July. Now remember, we had no budget back in July. Failed to let legislators know we might need to give back $15 million while we're putting together a budget.
Right.
These are concerns internally. That's why we need to look at an external third-party audit. Get someone that doesn't have a vested interest in this issue.
But it really helped the state
Yeah.
to keep all that $30 million,
The
doesn't
whole
it?
question is, why is all that money being paid out in the first place if it's not due to the plans, if they're not supposed to have that?
Well, yeah, that's the
The
big
point is
question,
nobody's
right?
checking.
Yeah.
With any state contract, we ought to make sure that the money's spent the way it's supposed to be spent, and it hasn't been checked all these years. Matter of fact, there was an expose in the mid-90s or so, I think the Star Tribune did one, that there was a study at DHS to find out if the PMAP program was spending the money wisely and so on. And the headline of the paper said, study of HMOs shelved after the HMOs complained. And it was never, again, all those years. The health plans would say, we file boxes of reports, paper after paper. But the things you need to figure it out, the auditors say they don't have they can't track it based on the way they account.
Now, Senator Marty, what do you think about Commissioner Jessen's, she was criticized by the legislative auditor for not being forthcoming with this.
I think it's her job to be forthcoming, and again, I've seen some of those things that she didn't produce the documents, and I think that's troubling. I think the concern, what we want to have happen is we want to make sure that all this money is tracked and it's responsibly spent. And nobody has been doing that, and that's why we're asking for the audit. And we want to have an audit, not just for the future, but looking back these last couple of years to find out how the money's been spent. And we have to track that. I think the taxpayers are due that. And
again,
huge amounts.
getting back to that third-party independent audit, the Blue Cross Blue Shield, again, through some data practices requests, and this is probably on the website you're talking about, there was an internal audit or report or whatever that they had contracted for with Deloitte. And Deloitte's report came back and said, we looked at your books, and based on any normal accounting standards, they don't work right. But since the Department of Human Services doesn't require you to do it differently, I guess you're okay.
You're okay. Well, we're running short on time, so I want to ask you a couple questions. Senator Nienow, you introduced legislation this session that required the independent third-party audit. It looks like your bill has been changed in committee several times and has lots of amendments added to it. Why is that happening, and what's the substance of the amendments?
Well, first of all, most of those amendments disappeared. When the legislation was put into the omnibus bill.
Okay.
There was one provision, the rule we call Rule 101, the requirement that the plans participate in all of the programs if they're going to sell insurance in Minnesota at all. That's still there.
Was that kind of a bipartisan agreement on that?
It's hard to know, and it's hard to know the impact. I'm not sure that it has a big impact because the health plans, they want the business anyway. So,
yeah.
But there were a couple of amendments like that. As he said, most came off.
Yeah, most of them came off. The substance of the bill is the shape that it's in now. It seems to be pretty good. We need to tweak it up just a little bit to clean it up, but the substance of the bill seems to be pretty good once we get it cleaned up.
You wanted? I'm good with you asking this last question. That sounds good to me.
So within the past year, DHS has changed the way that it has set rates for public programs by conducting a competitive bidding pilot project in the metro area. So what's the net result of that?
Well, the administration said it saved $100-some million, but when you look at the cost growth in it, even when you factor in how many more people were added to the Medicaid program in the last year, I think there are lots of questions about it. The biggest question I have is there are 4 plans who are bidding on this, and all 4 of them won. I mean, 2 of the plans said were the ones that were the best value, and so, and they got more, but the other 2 plans were allowed to continue serving at least some parts of the metro area. And I guess I have a question: what good is the competitive bidding if they're all going to win it anyway?
So from my understanding, are you looking for the best way to do the bidding? I mean, is that what's going to hopefully come out of this?
We want to make sure the money is. We want to make sure that the money is being appropriately spent and it's not being wasted. And I think we have no confidence that that's happening.
Yeah, the auditing portion is separate from the bidding. which is kind of new, and that's not statewide. It's a pilot program in the metro area right now, but they're separated from one another. You know, it's interesting on the competitive bids. When that was first announced, I was a little bit skeptical, and I said I'm concerned that if we go out for a competitive bid,
right,
and everybody wins, then nobody loses, and where's the competition? Well, what happened is we had 4 plans at the beginning, 4 plans bid, 4 plans got a book of business, and when I requested, you know, what was their head count before and what was their head count after, there was a county-based purchasing plan that went out of business as a result of all of this.
Okay.
And those people got rolled into these new plans, and as a result, the numbers that I had when I was given when I asked, every single one of the plans had more people participating in their plan than before the competitive bidding. So everybody won. Then who lost, and where's the competition, and what's the incentive to competitively bid next time? And that was my concern.
Seems awkward.
Yeah.
So where do you go from here?
I think, first of all, we have to pass the legislation for the audit. I think, and we have to do a thorough audit from people
Seems
who
like,
aren't.
why would you have to make a law to just do what
That's
should
a
be
good
normal
question.
process?
It's a good question.
And why do you have to work so hard to get it done?
Yeah,
Do you
that
have the
seems
votes for
like
that?
a no-brainer.
We don't know. He's on the conference committee, and that's where the decision will be made.
What do you think?
What's your prediction?
You know, I haven't seen who the House conferees are. Nobody opposes it.
Yeah, right, sure.
But
So
it doesn't
far.
happen.
See what they have. Well,
And then what? Well, were you going to follow up with?
I
what's
think
next?
we have to do more than that, but I think that the first thing we've got to do is find out what's been happening. And when one of the health plans gives back 30 million, then 4 of them this year were returning 73 million, and their questions, I mean, they're still in charge of all the accounting, and there's been no auditing, and even so, we're getting this money coming back. The question is, how much more is there that should be coming back to the state?
Well, the best line I heard from you, John, was, you know, we started asking some tough questions last year and pressuring into this year. Last year they gave $30 million back. This year with the negotiation with the governor, they gave back $73 million. Just by asking some tough questions, we're $103 million to the good. What'll happen if we have an audit?
Audit. It could be real money.
Right.
and that benefits the taxpayer, and that's why they should care.
That's exactly it.
Well, thank you, Senator Marty and Senator Nienow, for coming on and taking your time out to explain to our viewers what's going on with this. It's
Yeah, and
important.
doing your job. That's great. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's good to see you guys working together to tackle
It's fun to do.
tackle the issues. All right, we'll be right back after this brief pause with Representative John Kriesel. We'll talk about why the Vikings Stadium got the smackdown last night in committee.
Ooh.